Monaco Palace, March 3, 1963. Grace Kelly sat in the palace's private medical wing staring at the ultrasound image in her trembling hands. After 7 years of marriage to Prince Rainier, she was pregnant with her 4th child, but the joy she should have felt was overshadowed by the document lying on the table beside her. An official letter from the Vatican that would force her to make an impossible choice. The letter was brief but devastating. Your Serene Highness, recent medical reports indicate complications that may require termination of pregnancy to preserve your life. As you are aware, the Catholic Church's position on such matters is absolute. Any action contrary to Church doctrine will result in immediate excommunication and the loss of Monaco's recognition as a Catholic principality. Grace's hand shook as she read the final paragraph. Furthermore, such action would nullify Prince Albert's succession rights, as he would no longer be considered legitimate heir to a Catholic throne. The choice was impossible: save her own life and lose everything her family had built, or risk death to preserve the crown that had already cost her so much. What happened in the next 48 hours would destroy Grace Kelly's spirit, end her marriage in all but name, and reveal the cruel price of being a princess in a world where women's lives mattered less than political power. The fairy tale was about to become a nightmare from which Grace Kelly would never truly wake up. Dr. Henry Ducruet had been Grace's physician since she arrived in Monaco. A gentle man in his 60s, he had delivered Caroline, Albert, and Stephanie. He had always treated Grace with kindness and respect. But that morning, his face was grave as he explained the medical reality. Your Serene Highness, he said quietly, the pregnancy is complicated by your previous cesarean sections. Your uterine wall has been weakened. Carrying this child to term, there is a significant risk of uterine rupture. Grace stared at him. What does that mean exactly? Dr. Ducruet looked uncomfortable. It means you could hemorrhage. It means you could die. Grace felt the world spinning around her. And the baby? The baby would likely survive if we can deliver in time. But princess, we're talking about your life. Grace closed her eyes. 3 children already. Caroline was 7, Albert was 6, Stephanie was barely 3. They needed their mother. What are my options? She asked quietly. Dr. Ducruet hesitated. Medically speaking, we could terminate the pregnancy now, while it's still safe, or we could monitor you very carefully and hope for the best. And if I choose to continue the pregnancy, then you would need to remain in the hospital for the next 6 months, complete bed rest, constant monitoring. And even then, he trailed off. Grace understood. Even then she might die. That's when Dr. Ducruet showed her the Vatican letter. He had been required to send Grace's medical records to the Church, as was protocol for all royal pregnancies in Catholic principalities. The Vatican's response had been swift and merciless. Grace read the letter 3 times, each reading making her feel sicker. They're saying that if I terminate this pregnancy to save my life, I'll be excommunicated, she asked. More than that, Dr. Ducruet said sadly. Monaco's recognition as a Catholic principality would be revoked. Your husband's authority comes from the Church. Without that recognition, Grace finished the thought. Rainier would no longer be a legitimate ruler. Albert would have no claim to the throne. Dr. Ducruet nodded. The principality would likely be absorbed by France. Monaco, as you know, it would cease to exist. Grace stared at the ultrasound image again. A tiny life growing inside her, a life that might kill her. But saving her own life would destroy everything else. That evening, Grace sat in her private sitting room, waiting for Rainier to return from a meeting with his advisors. She had requested this meeting, knowing it would be one of the most difficult conversations of her life. When Rainier entered, Grace could see immediately that he already knew about the Vatican letter. His face was set in the cold, distant expression she had come to dread over the years. Rainier, she began. We need to talk about the pregnancy. He sat down across from her, not meeting her eyes. I've spoken with Dr. Ducruet. I understand the situation. Then you understand that I might die if I continue this pregnancy. Rainier was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was measured and controlled. Grace, you are the Princess of Monaco. You have responsibilities that go beyond your personal desires. Grace felt as though he had slapped her. Personal desires? Rainier, we're talking about my life. We're talking about the survival of Monaco itself, he replied coldly. Do you understand what excommunication would mean? What the loss of Vatican recognition would do to this principality? Grace stared at her husband in disbelief. Are you saying that Monaco is more important than my life? Rainier finally looked at her. His eyes were hard, distant. I'm saying that you knew what you were agreeing to when you married me. You knew that being Princess of Monaco meant putting the principality first, always. Grace felt tears beginning to form. I gave up my career for you. I gave up my country, my friends, my entire life. I gave you 3 children. What more do you want from me? I want you to do your duty, Rainier said simply. Grace realized in that moment that she was truly alone. The man she had married, the father of her children, was asking her to risk her life for political reasons. And if I die in childbirth? She asked quietly. Rainier's expression didn't change. Then you will die as a princess should, with honor and duty. Grace stood up slowly. Get out, she whispered. Grace, get out, she screamed, her composure finally breaking. Get out of my sight. Rainier left without another word. Grace collapsed into her chair and wept. For the first time since coming to Monaco, she understood the true cost of her crown. That night, Grace made a phone call to the one person she knew would understand her father, Jack Kelly. Jack Kelly was a tough man who had built an empire in Philadelphia. But when he heard his daughter's voice, broken and desperate, his heart shattered. Daddy, Grace whispered into the phone. I don't know what to do. Grace told him everything. The pregnancy, the medical risks, the Vatican letter, Rainier's cold response. She spoke for nearly an hour, her voice breaking repeatedly as she described the impossible choice she faced. Jack Kelly was silent for a long time after Grace finished speaking. That son of a bitch, he finally said, his voice deadly quiet. That goddamn European aristocrat thinks he owns my daughter. Daddy. No, Grace. Listen to me. You come home, right now. Tonight. I can't, Grace said. If I leave Monaco now, it will cause a scandal. The press will. I don't give a damn about the press, Jack Kelly interrupted. I care about my daughter. You pack a bag and you get on the next plane to Philadelphia. Grace felt a surge of love for her father. Here was someone who put her life above politics, above duty, above everything else. But the children, bring them too. All of them. You think I can't protect my own grandchildren? For a moment, Grace allowed herself to imagine it. Going home to Philadelphia, raising her children in America, being free of the golden cage that Monaco had become. But then reality set in. Daddy, if I leave, I lose everything. The children lose their inheritance. Albert loses his right to rule Monaco, and this baby, if I terminate the pregnancy in America, the church will still excommunicate me. Rainier could use that as grounds for divorce. I could lose my children entirely. Jack Kelly was quiet. He understood the trap his daughter was in. Then what are you going to do, baby girl? Grace looked out the window at the Mediterranean Sea. It was beautiful and peaceful, but she felt like she was drowning. I'm going to gamble with my life, she said quietly, because I don't have any other choice. The next 6 months were a nightmare. Grace remained in the palace's medical wing, confined to bed, monitored constantly. The pregnancy was difficult from the beginning. She experienced bleeding, severe nausea, and constant fear. But worse than the physical symptoms was the emotional isolation. Rainier visited her dutifully, but their conversations were formal and distant. The warmth that had once existed between them was gone forever. The children were brought to see her regularly, but Grace could see the fear in their eyes. Caroline, now 8, asked repeatedly if Mommy was going to die. Grace tried to reassure her daughter, but how could she make promises she wasn't sure she could keep? The Vatican sent regular inquiries about Grace's condition. They wanted to ensure that she was receiving proper spiritual guidance during this test of faith. A parade of priests came to counsel her. They spoke about duty and sacrifice, about the greater good and God's plan. None of them seemed to care that she was terrified. As the pregnancy progressed, Grace's condition worsened. She developed high blood pressure and signs of toxemia. Dr. Ducrouet warned that they might need to deliver the baby early. How early? Grace asked. 7 months, possibly 6. The baby would need intensive care, but it could survive. Grace nodded. She had made peace with the possibility of having a premature baby, as long as they both survived, but in her 7th month, everything went wrong. Grace woke up in the middle of the night with severe abdominal pain. When she called for the nurse, she saw blood on the sheets. Dr. Ducrouet arrived within minutes, took one look at the situation, and immediately called for an emergency surgical team. We need to deliver now, he told Grace as they wheeled her to the operating room. The uterine wall is separating. If we wait any longer, you'll both die. Grace barely had time to process what was happening before the anesthesia took effect. She woke up 12 hours later to find Rainier sitting beside her bed. For the first time in months, his expression showed genuine emotion. "Grace," he said softly. "You're alive. Thank God you're alive." Grace looked around the room. "The baby?" Rainier's face fell. "Grace, the baby didn't survive. The umbilical cord was compressed during the rupture. There wasn't enough oxygen." Grace felt her world collapse. She had risked everything to carry this child to term. She had endured months of fear and isolation. She had nearly died, and it had all been for nothing. "I'm so sorry," Rainier whispered, taking her hand. "I'm so sorry for everything." But Grace pulled her hand away. The apology was too little, too late. "Get out," she said quietly. "Grace, please." "I said get out." Rainier left, and Grace was alone with her grief. The official announcement said that Princess Grace had suffered a miscarriage due to medical complications. There was no mention of the Vatican letter, the impossible choice, or the months of suffering that had preceded the tragedy. Grace spent 3 weeks in the hospital recovering from the surgery. The physical healing was straightforward, but the emotional recovery was a different matter entirely. She lay in her hospital bed, staring at the ceiling for hours at a time. She couldn't cry. She couldn't sleep properly. She couldn't even feel angry. She felt nothing at all, as if something essential inside her had died along with the baby. Rainier came to see her every day, bringing flowers, sitting awkwardly beside her bed, trying to make conversation about palace business or the children's activities. But Grace barely responded. "The doctors say you're healing well," he said one afternoon. Grace didn't look at him. "Am I?" "Grace, I know this is difficult. Do you?" Grace's voice was flat, emotionless. "Do you know what this is like?" Rainier shifted uncomfortably. "We both lost the baby." Grace finally turned to look at her husband. "You lost a baby, Rainier. I lost everything." When Grace was finally released from the hospital, she moved into a suite on the opposite side of the palace. "I need space," she told Rainier when he questioned the arrangement. "Grace, we should be supporting each other through this grief. Should we?" Grace looked at him with eyes that held no warmth. "Where was your support when I was begging you to consider alternatives that might save my life?" The children sensed the change immediately. Caroline began acting out at school. Albert became more withdrawn. Stephanie started having nightmares. Grace tried to be present for her children, but she felt like she was watching their lives through glass. She could see their pain, could understand they needed their mother, but she couldn't seem to reach them emotionally. 3 months after the tragedy, Grace received an unexpected visitor. Cary Grant arrived unannounced, demanding to see his old friend from their To Catch a Thief days. Grace hadn't seen Cary since before her marriage. Seeing her now, he was visibly shocked by the change in his old friend. "My God, Grace," he said, settling into a chair across from her. "What have they done to you?" Grace tried to summon her old smile, but it felt false, a performance she no longer had the energy to maintain. "I'm fine, Cary, just tired." "You're not fine," Cary said bluntly. "You look like someone has stolen your soul." Grace laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Maybe they have." Cary leaned forward. "Grace, I've known you for 10 years. You were always the strongest person in any room. What I'm seeing now, this isn't you." "Maybe this is who I really am," Grace said quietly. "No." Cary's voice was firm. The real Grace Kelly would be fighting back. Grace looked at him with surprise. Fighting back against what? Against a system that treated you like a broodmare? Against a husband who valued his crown more than your life? Grace felt a spark of something, anger, maybe, or recognition. "It's not that simple, Cary, isn't it?" He walked to the window. "Right now you're performing the role of the dutiful princess who accepts her fate gracefully, but it's killing you. I don't know how to stop. I don't know how to be anything else anymore." "Then remember who you were before you became Princess Grace. Remember the woman who won an Academy Award, the woman who made her own choices. That woman died in a hospital room 3 months ago." "No," Cary said firmly. "She's just buried under a lot of pain, but she's still there, Grace." After Cary left, Grace found herself thinking about his words. For the first time since the tragedy, she began to consider that maybe she didn't have to accept what had happened to her. The change in Grace was gradual but noticeable. She began taking longer walks in the palace gardens. She started reading again, Neebish novels and poetry that fed her soul rather than palace-approved histories. Most importantly, she began to reclaim her relationship with her children. "Caroline," she said one afternoon, "would you like to learn about acting?" Caroline's eyes lit up. "Could I?" Grace smiled. A real smile this time. "I think it's time I taught you some things your mama learned in Hollywood." They spent the afternoon with Grace showing Caroline how to project her voice, how to convey emotion through gesture, how to command attention. "Acting isn't about pretending to be someone else," Grace explained. "It's about finding the truth in a character and bringing it to life." Over the following weeks, Grace incorporated Albert and Stephanie into these sessions. For an hour each afternoon, Grace wasn't Princess Grace of Monaco. She was just a mother playing with her children, teaching them skills from another life. It was during one of these sessions that Rainier found them. He stood in the doorway watching as Grace helped Albert rehearse a scene. "What's going on here?" Rainier asked. Grace looked up at her husband. "I'm teaching our children about theater." "Is that appropriate for royal children?" Grace felt that spark of anger again, stronger this time. "They're also my children, Rainier. And their mother was an actress before she was a princess." "Grace, perhaps we should discuss." "No," Grace said firmly. "These children lost their sibling. They nearly lost their mother. If spending time with them, teaching them something I love, helps heal our family, then that's what I'm going to do." It was the first time since the tragedy that Grace had spoken to Rainier with anything approaching her old strength. "I didn't mean to suggest—" "Yes, you did," Grace said. "But you know what? Princess Grace is also Grace Kelly. And Grace Kelly is their mother. And their mother is going to do whatever she thinks is best for her children." That evening, Grace called her father. "Hello, baby girl," Jack Kelly said. "How are you doing?" "Daddy," Grace said, "I think I'm ready to start fighting back." "Tell me what you need, Grace." Grace looked around her sitting room, her space, decorated with photos of her children and mementos from her acting career. "I need to remember who I am," she said, "and I need to make sure my children know who their mother really is." "That sounds like the Grace Kelly I raised," Jack said, pride in his voice. "I'm still here, Daddy. I'm still here." In 1971, nearly 8 years after the tragedy, Grace gave a rare interview to a trusted journalist. She was asked about the most difficult period of her life. Grace was quiet for a long time before answering. "I learned something terrible during those months," she said finally. "I learned that when you're a woman in a position of power, your life doesn't actually belong to you. It belongs to institutions, to politics, to everyone except yourself." The journalist asked if she regretted marrying Rainier. Grace looked out at the Mediterranean, the same view she had stared at during those dark months in 1963. "I regret that I was so naive," she said. "I thought love would be enough. I thought being a princess would be like being in a movie. I didn't understand that real princesses are sacrificed for the greater good." When asked about the lost pregnancy, Grace's voice broke slightly. "I lost more than a child that year," she said. "I lost my faith in fairy tales. I lost my faith in love. I lost my faith in the idea that good things happen to good people." Grace Kelly lived for 19 more years after that interview, but those who knew her said she never recovered from the choice she had been forced to make. She died in 1982 in that mysterious car accident, and some people whispered that maybe, after all those years of carrying such pain, she had finally found a way to escape the golden cage that had trapped her. The Vatican letter that started it all was discovered in Grace's private papers after her death. Along with it was a note she had written but never sent. "To whom it may concern, I was forced to choose between my life and my duty. I chose duty, and it destroyed me. No woman should ever have to make such a choice. No crown is worth a human life. Grace Kelly, 1,963 inches." The note was never made public. The Monaco royal family buried it, along with all the other secrets that surrounded Grace Kelly's tragic reign. But the truth about what happened in 1963 reveals something important about the real cost of power and the price that women have always been expected to pay for the privilege of wearing a crown. Grace Kelly gave up her Hollywood career to become a princess. She gave up her homeland, her independence, her dreams. In 1963, she was asked to give up her life as well. The fairy tale princess was real, but the fairy tale itself was a lie that cost Grace Kelly everything she had, including her hope. If this story moved you, please share it with others who need to understand the real price of being a woman in power. Hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments, should Grace Kelly have chosen differently? Don't miss our next video, where we reveal another shocking secret about Grace Kelly's life in Monaco Palace, the truth about her mysterious car accident, and why some people believe it wasn't really an accident at all. Remember, behind every crown is a woman who sacrificed more than the world will ever know. Grace Kelly's story is proof that sometimes the greatest tragedy isn't failing to live happily ever after. It's being forced to pretend that you did.